다들인데, 음, 난你们 개발의 차대요로 더디 망어 순수你们 개발의 차대요래.
Today is the 8th day of the Marangok Summer Teachings. So I'd like to offer my greetings to everyone who's living over the internet, to all the lamas and spiritual friends, the tulkus, the members of the Sangha, and everyone else, all my other Dharma friends who are listening all over the world. Now, a couple of days ago, I was supposed to give a teaching, and I was unable to give the teaching because I but I was a little tired and could not give the teaching. And last night I was planning to give the teaching. I thought for a while that I wouldn't be able to give the teaching. But when I got up this morning, it was no problem. And I was able to continue and teach the teaching.
Now we've
been speaking about the introduction to Ananda. And I divided this introduction to Ananda into 3 sections. And we've come to the 3rd topic, which is about Ananda's attitude towards women. Now, this has 4 different internal divisions: his support for women's ordination, how he helped dispel the difficulties women face. The 3rd is the story of Ananda and the outcast girl Sarupa. And the 4th section is how he helped bring peace back to the royal palace. So these are the 4 different sections of this. And so the first of them is Ananda's attitude towards women and how he supported his support for the ordination of women. Now, Ananda, generally, his character was just that he was very compassionate. He was someone who was always able to really think about other people and care for other people. And so for this reason, he really cared about other people. And in particular, he really thought greatly about the joys and sorrows of all of the 4 different groups of the Buddhist students, that is, the 4 communities. So he was not only concerned and took care for the joys and sorrows of the bhikshus, but also for the bhikshunis, as well as the male lay practitioners and the female lay practitioners. For example, one example of this is his support for women's ordination. Now, if there had been no Ananda, normally we speak about the 4 types of the Buddhist students, the 4-fold Buddhist community. And if that had been the case, there would have been only a 3-fold Buddhist community. There would have only been 3 types of the Buddhist students. The reason why we can say this is, as recorded in the Vinaya scriptures, it was because of Ananda's support and encouragement that the formation of the Buddhist Bhikshuni Sangha, or the Sangha of Buddhist nuns, was established. And so to give a citation from a sutra here. Now, this sutra is from a sutra that was translated into Chinese during the Han Dynasty. And the name of this sutra is the Sutra of the Buddha's Skillful Means in Repaying Kindness. Now, it's not clear. The name of the translator into Chinese was not recorded. but it was also translated into Tibetan in the past. And what it says here is that it was because of Ananda's kindness that women were able to go forth and become nuns. And so what it says is that the Buddha had said to Mahaprajapati that their being able to go forth was Ananda's kindness and not the Buddha's. So it's because of Ananda that women were able to enter the Buddhist teachings. And so in the future, bhikshunis and laywomen and women should always think of Ananda one-pointedly. And if they venerate and respect him, then that would be good, it says. And as the Buddha said, and Gautami Prajapati also instructed the bhikshunis and women thus. She said, we have to go for refuge to Ananda, and in particular, any woman who wants happiness or auspiciousness, or to achieve any of the results of spiritual practice, should always put on new clean clothes on the 8th day of the 2nd month of spring and the 8th day of the 2nd month of fall, and swear one-pointedly to the 8 rules for one day. So this is primarily being said to the laywomen. And so they should take the 8 rules for one day and then continually be diligent in making offerings. Then Ananda will protect her through his miracles, and her wishes will be fulfilled. And so this is what it says in the sutra. Now this sutra, if you wonder, is it a Mahayana or a foundation vehicle sutra? It is a Mahayana sutra. The reason why I'm citing it now is that it's related to the issue of women go forth. And so that's why I described it here. And another particular thing I need to mention here is that during our Ardya Chema winter Dharma gathering for nuns, it used to be a winter Dharma gathering, now we call it a spring gathering. So during the spring gathering, we performed the ritual for the nuns teaching to flourish. So we began the tradition of reciting this ritual that is in order to help the women's ordination to flourish. And so there's a tanka that we made. Maybe you remember it. Now, I couldn't find a picture of it now, but the tanka is generally a picture of Avalokiteshvara, but in front of Avalokiteshvara is an image of Ananda. And the reason why we need to arrange that tanka during this ritual is that in the sutra of the Buddha's skillful means of repaying kindness, it speaks about how the Buddha told the nuns that they should pay homage to Ananda, and also how Mahaprajapati said that the nuns should pay attention to him, and that if they did so, then Ananda would protect women and help them fulfill their wishes. And so these said that they are very great reasons for doing so. Likewise, there's also a ritual of the 1,000-armed, 1,000-eyed Chenrezig Avalokiteshvara in the Tenjur. And in this one, when you receive the cities, or you request the cities, Avalokiteshvara either emanates forms of Ananda, or the Avalokiteshvara becomes the form of Ananda. I don't remember which it is exactly, but in any case, you are asking for the cities from Ananda. So that's a practice that is describing there. And so, in general, Ananda is very compassionate, and so it's like also said that that Ananda is an emanation of Avalokiteshvara. So for that reason, during the Ardya Chema spring Dharma gathering, we arrange this tanka, And so I thought I'd explain this to you now. The worst thing is that today I couldn't find the picture. And so if I can find it, then I will show it, and you will probably remember it. So actually today. So next I will continue to speak about the topic of the ordination of women. Maybe I won't show that quite yet. Now, as I mentioned the other day, after the Buddha awoke to enlightenment, around 5 or 6 years later, he went back to his own homeland, of Kapilavastu. And when he went to Kapilavastu, many of the high-status men, or the noblemen, the lords, went to the Buddha, and they went forth as monastics. And when they went forth, then the wives and sisters and daughters of these high-status Shakya men also wanted to follow the Buddha and eventually go forth. So they had a great hope that this might happen. So one day they all looked for an opportunity, and they went to request the Buddha to allow them to go forth. Now, when they made this request, when this occurred, is according to the Theravada tradition, it is said that the Buddha Shakyamuni went to Kapilavastu on 2 occasions. The first time he went, King Shuddhodana was still alive. He met his father, King Shuddhodana. And so there's that. Those events happened at that time. But on the second visit, it was after King Shuddhodana had passed away. And so there was Shakyamuni also had to go back to Kapilavastu at that time. And so it's basically the time when women asked to go forth was during the Buddha's second visit to Kapilavastu. This is how it's described in the Theravada tradition. In any case, the place where the Buddha was asked, where the women asked to go forth, was in Kapilavastu, and it was in the Banyan Park in Kapilavastu. And this was Banyan Park was a monastery that had been given to the Buddha. He built the monastery and he gave it to the Buddha at that time. And so while the Buddha was at Banyan Park in Kapilavastu, then Mahaprajapati. So this is King Shuddhodana's queen. And King Shuddhodana had 2 queens. The first was the Buddha's mother, Mayadevi, and the second was Mahaprajapati. So Mahaprajapati came, and along with him, there also came 500 Shakya women. There was over 500 Shakya women who came to the Buddha. They first prostrated to the Buddha, and then they sat down by the Buddha. And first, the Buddha taught them Dharma. He encouraged and inspired them. And then after he had given all the Dharma, then he sat without speaking it and not saying anything. And at that time, Mahaprajapati said to the Buddha, if women with a female body have the opportunity to achieve the 4 results, a spiritual result, then please allow women to go forth and become bhikshunis and to practice chaste conduct within the Buddhist Sangha. So the 4 results of spiritual are this true reminder, once a returner, non-returner, and arhat. So if women can practice and achieve all four of those results, then please allow women to go forth. Allow them to become bhikkshunis. And so this is the request she made to the Buddha. Now, the response the Buddha gave to Mahaprajapati at that time was Gautami, or Mahaprajapati. You can continue doing as you're doing now. You can continue to wear the white clothes of a householder, so wear the white clothes of a laywoman. And while you're wearing these white clothes, then continue to practice chaste conduct. So basically doing the practice of a chaste layperson. Then this will bring you lasting benefit and happiness, he said. Basically, he's saying you don't need to go forth. Just continue to wear your lay clothes. But if you take the vows of chaste conduct, then it'll continue to be a great benefit to you. And so this is what he said. But Mahaprajapati had a great wish to go forth, and so she made this request 3 times. First, she asked once, and then she asked a second time, then she asked the third time. She asked 3 times. She was really rather insistent about it, but the Buddha continued to say, just as before, wear the clothes of laywomen, and then stay and practice chaste conduct. That is enough, he said. But he wouldn't allow them to go forth and become bhikkshunis. So this is the first time that Mahaprajapati asked the Buddha to allow women to go forth. Then the teacher left Kapilavastu and went to another place. And later, he went to this place called Nadika. And so the Buddha was staying in Nadika, and when Prajapati heard that he was in Nadika, then she and the 500 Shakyamuni, who had previously asked the Buddha to allow them to go forth, they all got together. And what they did, as I said, they decided we're going to go forth, and we decided because we've got to show that we've done this. And so what they did is they shaved their heads. Now, in the old times in India, if a woman shaved her head, it was like it shows they had a big decision. It's not something you did easily. And so probably the tradition that they only would shave their head when their husbands died or something like that. So here they shaved their heads, they put on Dharma robes. So this is basically old Indian tradition. They put on the Dharma robes and they went to the place where the Buddha was staying. So at that place, the teacher was staying and resting at a place called Kunjika in Nadika. So he was staying in Kunjika and resting there. So Prajapati and all of the Shakyamuni they're all a little bit old, and they'd come from a long way away. Their bodies are completely exhausted, and they're also completely covered in dust all over their bodies. They came to the Buddha, and they went through a lot of hardship to get there. And when they got there, they prostrated and they sat down. And the Buddha, as before, taught them Dhamma. He encouraged them, inspired them. And then when he was sitting without saying anything, then Prajapati, just as before, once again asked him, please allow him to go forth and become bhikkshunis. And what the Buddha said at that time was, they had already shaved their heads, right? They had already put on Dharma robes. They came like that. So he couldn't just say, as he had before, that you should wear the clothes of laywomen and do as before. They'd already changed. So he said, you can wear Dharma robes and practice chaste conduct. That's fine for you to wear Dharma codes. It's fine to do that. Continue to do that. And then take the vows of chaste conduct. But you don't need to go forth and take Bhikshuni vows, he said. So, in brief, at that time, he did not allow the women to go forth and take the Bhikshuni vows. Now, in the Tibetan this is not clear in the Tibetan text of the finer points of the Vinaya discipline, but it is clear in the Chinese translation of the finer points of discipline. So this is what I was going to show you before. This is the first request that Prajapati made to the Buddha. And then there's a question of how Ananda made the request. So now, if we take the finer points of the Vinaya as in the Tibetan tradition translation of the Mahasavastivada as the basis, then Mahaprajapati had asked 6 times in total, earlier and later, to go forth, but the Buddha still did not accept. And when he didn't accept, then Mahaprajapati was very sad, and she sat in a corner outside the door and crying, shedding tears. Now Ananda saw the situation, and he immediately came to Mahaprajapati and said, "Why are you sitting here crying?" he asked. And the response that Prajapati gave was that the teacher has not allowed women to go forth and to be ordained as bhikshunis. And so that's why I'm crying, she said. So this is what she said to Ananda. And so Ananda immediately said, "Oh, Gautami Mahaprajapati, please wait. I'll go ask the Bhagavan, you don't worry." And so he immediately went inside to the Buddha to ask him. Now, when he got in to see the Buddha, then first he prostrated, then he sat off to one side, and before he made the request to the Buddha, he asked the Buddha a question. And I think that this question is actually a very important one. He said, "Bhagavan, if women go forth in the Dharma Vinaya and are fully ordained as bhikshunis, and then practice chaste conduct stably, will they attain the 4 results of the spiritual way, or will they not?" So this is the question he asked. And the answer the Buddha gave is they will. They will achieve them. If women practice in that way, it's the question, will they achieve the highest result? Will they achieve the ultimate result is the question that he asked. And when the Buddha said that he could, then what the Buddha said is, if that is the case, then please give women an opportunity to go forth. Now, this is an important question, because if women were to go forth and become bhikshunis and practice the Dharma, but not achieve the higher results, then there'd be no point for women to go forth. But the Buddha said that if women went forth and practiced the Dharma, they would achieve the 4 results of the spiritual way. And so Ananda seized that word and said, "Please allow women to go forth." Now, this question here, this question is not clear in the Tibetan translation of the finer points of monastic discipline, but in the Chinese translation of the finer points, it is very clear. And this question is also probably very clear in the Theravada scriptures. And so I have added here, because I think it's clear that it's important that this question be clear. And then the teacher, when he said, "Please allow women to go forth and give them the bhikshuni vow," then the teacher said, "Do not request that women may go forth, don't ask that they go be ordained as bhikshunis. It's better that you don't ask for that. The reason, if you ask, is because if women go forth into the Dharma Vinaya, then the teachings of the Vinaya will not remain for a long time. They will not stay for a long time stably. And in terms of why the Dharma would not remain so long, he gave 3 different examples. So he's talking about the point of women not going forth, what the effect of women going forth, or the danger would be. And so he taught this through analogies, and he gave 3 different analogies. Now, the first analogy, and this so I've presented the words exactly as they're shown in the Tibetan translation of the Finer Points of Discipline. But if I don't say them exactly, but just repeat them, it's like if you have a house where there are a lot of women, but there are very few men, then in Indian tradition, if there are no men in the household, then a lot of robbers will come to the house. And the reason is that the women are not able to oppose the bandits. And so there would be more dangers of thieves and robbers in the house. And also the men would come to steal, and they'd also take the women along with them. And so similarly, the Buddha said, if women go forth, the Dharma Vinaya will not remain for a long time. So this is the first reason he said. It's like the second reason is when you have like a field of beautiful solid rice. I mean, you've got, and when hail falls in it, then the solid rice is destroyed. Likewise, if women go forth, then the Dharma Vinaya will not remain long. Now, the third analogy he made is that when you have a field of sugar cane, and you've got a place where it's a really bountiful sugar, and there's a disease that affects sugarcane, rust it's called. So this rust affects the sugar cane. Then the sugarcane becomes unusable, it's wasted. And so similarly, if women go forth, the Dharma Vinaya will not remain for a long time, the Buddha said. And so he described this in terms of 3 analogies, how if women go forth, what the danger would be, or what the effect of women going forth would be. And so he made these analogies as an explanation.
상계기 빼다 자니 부메럽도 중원이나 급디디 야가가 지속가 나로래야 긴중이 되래야 강에 가리 용구에메 디고래야 제시.
So in brief, the Buddha had made an explanation of the effect that women going forth would have on the Sangha. And then what the Buddha said is that if women do have to go forth, then they need to accept the rules called the 8 heavenly dharmas. So the condition for women to go forth is that they have to accept these 8 heavy dharmas. And so the Buddha then taught the reasons why women have to take the 8 heavy dharmas by giving it another analogy. It's not that he made the 8 heavy dharmas without any reason or need. He had a reason or need, which he taught through an analogy. And so this is what it says in the finer points of the Vinaya. Now, this is not a literal transcription of the citation from the finer points. I've made it easier to understand. I compared the Chinese and the Tibetan translations of this passage, and I combined them to make it easier to understand. So in general, it says, if women go forth, then within the Indian society at that time would have an effect on how the Buddhist Sangha remained within India and with that society and that situation. It would cause some difficulties. However, what farmers do is that after the summer is over, when the autumn is beginning, then they dig irrigation canals into the fields. And when they dig the fields, then first you need to make like make a stable dam. And if you make a stable dam, then when you send the water in, then the water comes down. Because if you don't make that dam or that dike, then the water will flow over. So you have to make a dike on the side of the fields in order for the water to go through. And so one thing, it prevents the water to go elsewhere, and it also then will be directed in the field and will stay there and help them grow well. Similarly, in order that the negative effects of women going forth do not occur, and in order to create good relationships between the female and the male sanghas, then the Buddha said that he'd make these rules, the 8 heavy dharmas. And women need to observe these 8 heavy dharmas for their entire lives, he said. So this gives an example or an analogy for why the Buddha had to make the 8 heavy dharmas. So what are these 8 heavy dharmas? So the 8 heavy dharmas are 8 precepts or rules. So here I'm showing you the text as it is given, especially in the finer points of discipline. If I read them exactly as are, it's a little bit difficult, so I won't recite them as that. So those are the first 4. And then after that, we have the 5th through the 8th of the heavy dharmas. And so this presents them as they are in the finer points as literally as they are in the finer points of monastic discipline. To the basic meaning of the 8 dharmas, to explain it in brief. Now, the order is sometimes ordered in different ways. There are variations in the order of them in the Vinayas, the different school. This is the order that is given in the Mulasarvastivada tradition. In any case, the first thing is that when they go, when bhikshunis have gone forth and they do the sojong, which they have to do every 2 weeks, then they need to ask for permission from the bhikshus to do this from the Bhikshu Sangha, and they also have to invite a bhikshu to read the Patimokkha Sutra and to give them advice on teachings. The next one is that the bhikshunis may not hold their rains retreat in a place where there are no bhikshus. Now, what this means is that if there is a nunnery in one place, it's not saying that there had to be a bhikshu staying in that nunnery itself. What it means is that there are no bhikshus in the area, then the bhikshunis could not hold the rains retreat. But there's an exception to that. If there is a nunnery, and in the area there are bhikshus, but the bhikshus do not observe the Vinaya discipline, do not practice the 3 foundational practices, then it's not necessary because they're not observing it themselves. And if they're not observing it, then you don't need to ask them for permission. Now, the third is that at the end of the rains retreat, you have to do the pravarana ritual. So it's not the bhikshunis do not do the pravarana only on their own. They hold that, or the release of the rules of the strictures. They have to hold that in the with the dual sangha. And so during this pravarana ceremony, you have to admit all of the faults and offenses that occurred during the rains retreat. And so this had to be held with both the male and the female sanghas. Now, the fourth is that when women go forth and take full ordination, they must go forth and be full ordained by the dual sangha, and in particular, they have to make a request to the male bhikshus, and so that's how they have to take the full ordination. Now, the fifth is that if there is a new bhikshu who has just taken the vows, then all of the bhikshunis need to be respectful to them and prostrate to them. The fifth, and so now the sixth is that bhikshunis are not allowed to say bad words or to criticize or to disparage the bhikshus. The seventh is that bhikshunis are not allowed to discuss or recall bhikshus who've corrupted or who've done offenses. So they're not allowed to speak about the offenses that bhikshus have done. And the eighth, if a bhikshunu has one of the sangha remainders, one of the types of downfalls, then she needs to undergo penance with both sanghas for a fortnight. So that is a brief description of the 8 heavy dharmas. So these are the 8 heavy dharmas that the Buddha then taught to them. When he described them and he described them to Ananda, and when Ananda said, if the Mahaprajapati and the other bhikshunus take for this, then would it be okay for them to go forth? And the Buddha said it would be okay. And so Ananda was delighted. And the reason is that the Mahaprajapati had made many requests repeatedly, but the Buddha had not accepted them. But because of Ananda's intercession, he immediately agreed. And so Ananda was very happy. So he prostrated to the Buddha and got up and immediately went to see Prajapati. And he said to her, the Buddha has agreed to allow women to go forth and take full ordination. But in order that there be no negative effect from women going forth, in order that the relations between the sanghas go well, he has made these rules called the 8 heavy dharmas, the 8 high dharmas. And so women who go forth must keep them and observe them for the rest of their lives. And he explained each of the 8 heavy dharmas to Mahaprajapati. And when he explained them, he explained that the Buddha said that if you accept these 8 heavy dharmas, then it is fine, it is okay for you to go forth and be fully ordained. Now, when he explained the full answer to Mahaprajapati, then Prajapati was just delighted. She said that these 8 heavy dharmas that the Buddha has decided, so we'll accept them, we will practice them for the rest of our lives. If, like an example, some people who give girls wreaths of blue-8 flower and champaka flowers. So if some of them were to give a woman a beautiful flower, a beautiful wreath made of such beautiful flowers, the woman would be delighted. And when they take it with both of their hands, and they'd put it on their heads because they're so happy, right? Because women often really like beautiful flowers, and someone gives them really nice flowers, then women will be happy and they'll take it with 2 hands and they'll put it on their heads. Similarly, when the Buddha made these rules, she said, I'll take them and I promise them with my body, speech, and mind. And so at that point in our Tibetan Buddhist tradition, we'd say that Mahaprajapati accepted these and went forth and was ordained because of accepting these. But there is a sutra of Mahaprajapati in Chinese, and what it says in there is that Mahaprajapati first went forth and then protected the novice vows and then the nun in training, the Shikshamana vows, and then took the Bhikshuni vows. And that is, they took the vows in stages. So it's different than our Tibetan explanations. In any case, Mahaprajapati was the first Bhikshuni in the fourfold community, and this is generally accepted by everyone. And then there was a student of the Buddha named Upali, and he was very skilled and very knowledgeable about the Vinaya. And so he went to ask the Buddha, and he said, okay, Mahaprajapati has gone forth, so these other Shakyamuni need to go forth and be ordained. So how should we do it? He said. And so these other women should go forth and be full ordained in the stages, taking the vows. First, they need to go to refuge for refuge to the 3 jewels. Then they need to take the 5 vows, and then they need to take all of the vows in orders to become fully ordained. This is the rule that the Buddha made. Actually, I mentioned this the other day. When we talk about according to the Vibhajyavadam school and the Sarvasvadan schools, it said that the Buddha made the rules for the 8 heavy dharmas, and that these 8 heavy dharmas are like the most fundamental rules for nuns. But there's also a Mahasangika Vinaya that's in Chinese. And there it says that nuns do need to observe the 8 heavy dharmas, but they are not like the basic rules. They're not recognized as being such important precepts. Likewise, there's also the modern Chinese master Yin Shun, who is very well known. And he doubts whether the Buddha actually made these rules or not. The reason he gives is that in the Vinayas, when the Buddha made a rule, there's an incident, and because of that incident, then the Buddha made a rule. He didn't really have much of a custom of making rules without any incident occurring first. And so there was no particular incident or event that led to the 8 heavy dharmas. So it's not so easy to say that they were made by the Buddhas. But if we look for a source for them, then they originated probably very early, probably from the time of the Buddha, Yin Shun says. During the time of the Buddha, then there is a bit of a debate between Mahakashyapa and Ananda regarding women going forth. And he says that it seems possible that the 8 heavy dharmas may have been made by elder bhikshus with rigid traditional views. So this is his position. In any case, he does have this doubt, or he's raising this question as to whether the Buddha actually made the rules of the 8 heavy dharmas or not. So this is a debate that comes up among modern scholars, and that's something we need to be aware of. The next thing we need to understand we need to understand the background situation that made it necessary to make these 8 heavy dharmas. Because on the one hand, the Buddha allowed women to go forth, but on the other hand, in order to avoid causing any problems given the social situation at the time or in the relations between the male and the female sanghas, he made a strict rule that the nuns had to follow the 8 heavy dharmas. Now, there are some words from the finer points of discipline that explain this background. Now, these are not literally translating. This is, again, I've been kind of compared the Tibetan and the Chinese translations, and then I've tried to put them together. And I think if you read these, it's okay. This will be enough. And what it says here is that, as I said before, Mahaprajapati and the 500 Shakyan women had accepted the 8 heavy dharmas. And then the Buddha gave them the vows of going forth and full ordination. Once that had been done, later, the Mahaprajapati and the elder Shakya women also then began to ordain many other bhikshus. And then later, the bhikshuni vows were given to many people, and there are many bhikshus. Their numbers increased greatly, and the bhikshuni sangha increased in size greatly. And so on one day, then many of the elderly bhikshunis came to Prajapati, and they said to her, she said, "It's been a long time, a very long time since we bhikshunis went forth. But there are these new bhikshunis who've just taken their ordination. And there are many of these bhikshus for whom it hasn't been long since they've gone forth. And so is it okay if we do the prostrations according to the seniority? Because if the bhikshuni is senior in precepts, if the new bhikshus would prostrate to the elder bhikshunis, and the younger and the junior bhikshunis would prostrate to the elder bhikshus. And would it be okay if we did it that way?" And Prajapati said to them, "Sisters, what you're saying, Prajapati didn't immediately say it's okay, because the Buddha had previously so that bhikshunis of any seniority needed to prostrate to any bhikshu, no matter what his seniority. And so she didn't say that, and she said, "So sisters, please wait a minute. I'll go ask Nanda." So there's this little bit of a difficulty with the nuns, and when she had a problem, then she'd go immediately to Ananda. And so Mahaprajapati went to Ananda and told him about the situation. And Mahaprajapati said, "Okay, wait a minute, Prajapati. I'll go ask the Bhagavan and see what he has to say." Ananda went to see the Bhagavan, and he asked the Buddha. There are the elder bhikshunis. These are the elder bhikshunis. What they're saying is that it's been a very long time since they've gone forth, and there are these new bhikshus and gone forth, and it hasn't been long since they've gone forth. And so would it be okay for them to prostrate and pay respect to each other according to seniority? Would it be okay? And so he's asked this of the Buddha, then the answer the Buddha gave was this. Ananda says, "Do not speak such words," he says, "Don't say that." Now the reason is because if women had not gone forth, when devout Brahmins and householders met bhikshus, they would bring them fine food and give it to them interruptedly. Moreover, the Brahmins and householders would take clean white fabric, fold in layers, and spread it over the lanes, and say, "Kind bhikshus, please walk on this folded fabric. This will bring us benefit and happiness." Moreover, the Brahmins and householders would spread their hair on the ground and say, "Bhikshus, please walk on the hair. This will bring us benefit and happiness for a long time." This is easy to understand, right? if women hadn't gone forth, then within the Indian society, there would be in Indian society, people would pay the Sangha great respect. But because women have gone forth, there are fewer people who pay the Sangha respect, because in the Indian society, people really look down on women. Women are so denigrated that when the women are elevated and made into objects of veneration in the Sangha, then it's more difficult. So basically, when the women were introduced, then it began to create difficulties for the Sangha to maintain its livelihood. And the Buddha continued to speak. Ananda, if women had not gone forth in the Dharma Vinaya, then the splendor of my disciples, like the sun and moon, could not be occluded by those of great light, not to mention the corpse-like extremists. Ananda, if women had not gone forth in the Dharma Vinaya, my teachings would have remained stainless and undiminished for a full 1,000 years. Because they have gone forth, 500 years will be subtracted. So this is the societal constitution. The society really looked down on women. And there was a lot of criticism of women in the society. And so from the one hand, the Buddha gave them a big opportunity and allowed them into the Sangha. Once they'd been allowed into the Sangha community, they became someone whom everyone had to make offerings to and pay respect to. And so when women had become someone to be offered to or someone to be venerated, then this is uncomfortable for many Indian people. And so the sort of splendor of the Sangha decreased. And so it caused a big difficulty in the Sangha. The question of whether the Buddha would stay 1,000 years or not. This is, I think, it's not saying necessarily actually 1,000 years later, but it's showing the degree of danger that there was. It's showing there's a great danger to the Sangha. And so this is why the Buddha said that instead of staying 1,000 years, it'd stay 500 years. In saying this, is saying that this is a great danger. It does not mean that there's categorically, absolutely has to be 500 years subtracted from the duration of the teachings. That's not what it is saying. And so for these reasons, the Buddha said, Ananda, I have instructed that even if a Buddha has been fully ordained for 100 years, she must pay respect, join her palms, welcome, stand up, prostrate to newly ordained bhikshus, the Buddha said. So when he's speaking in the Veda, you need to take these 8 heavy dharmas, and among them, even a bhikshuni who has been a bhikshuni for 100 years still has to prostrate to new bhikshus. This is very clear, and the reason is because in society there is no regard for women. And because the women had been allowed to go forth, and that had created some difficulties for the Buddhist teachings. Likewise, if a woman who has gone forth does not pay homage to the bhikshus, and doesn't treat them well, then it would be seen even worse in society. First, the people would think they'd allowed someone who shouldn't have gone forth to go forth, and showing that they have some great pride, you'd think. Now, even if they don't have any pride, people in society would say, oh, they do have it. The people in society would say that they have such pride and they don't pay any respect to the bhikshus. And so the people in society would say all these, and there'd be so much talk about that in society, that women would give difficulty to the women who had gone forth. The difficulties wouldn't be just to the bhikshus, but also a difficulty for the bhikshus within the bhikshunis within that society. And this is what happened, is because it wasn't like it is today. You had to get your food from going on alms round. Your livelihood was 100% dependent upon other people. Every day you had to go for alms. And if people didn't see you, well, then they wouldn't give you any alms. And if they don't give you alms, then there's the danger of dying of hunger. And since the society really had to especially accommodate the society, then And the Buddha had no choice but to make a decision. And if we look at it, this method that he chose was one that actually helped women, because the women, people wouldn't respect them. They say that they're so prideful. Even if they weren't prideful, people say that they were, because this is the way people always criticize women like that. So they have too much pride. And so this is why I think why it was. So now I think it's best to take a 30-minute intermission.
I got a
copy of that Tanka I was mentioning earlier, so I'll show it to you now. So this is it. And this is the Tanka of Ananda and Avalokiteshvara that we do during the ritual for the nuns' Dharma to flourish during the Arya Chema Spring Dharma gathering. So Ananda is below below Chandrazik's hand. And so one of my Dharma friends painted this on my instruction. And of course, that ritual for the nuns' Dharma to flourish, I wrote the text that you recite, but I didn't write the entire ritual. So my hope is to finish the entire puja this year. And once that has been finished, then our nunneries can do as is described in the sutra and practice on the second month of spring and autumn. As I said, if this can happen, I think it would be very good. Next year, I'd like to continue speaking about the historical background for the 8 heavy dharmas. Now, in general, in ancient Indian history, as I described yesterday, you can divide it into many different periods. And the earliest period, as I mentioned last year, was the period of the Rig Veda. And during the period of the Rig Veda, there was a situation of equality between the sexes. And in particular, the Rig Veda includes many female authors. Also during that time, that period, which is probably from about before the Common Era, from about 1500 before the Common Era to about 1000 before the Common Era. So this is the period they're speaking about. And during this time, the custom was to practice monogamy. Then later, probably during the time the Rajura Veda was spreading, and so in terms of the Common Era dating, this is about 1,000 years before the Common Era and to 500 before Common Era. And during this period, women's status deteriorated. Their status and situation deteriorated, and women were considered untrustworthy. And it was said that women had more afflictions and faults, and so this is what people said at that time. So this is one explanation. However, even during that period, women were still allowed to perform sacrifices alongside their houses. This is one right that they continue to have. Following that is the period of the sutras. And so the period of the sutras, when we get to this period, which is between 500 BCE to around 250 BCE, so this is the period of time. And during this period, women's situation became even worse than it had been before. Now, among the sutras at that time, there are many sutras that were written during the there are many sutras that were written during this period. There is one called the Dharma Sutra, which established rules and laws. And what it says in here is that women belong to men. Instead of women being independent, having autonomy, they were the chattel of the men. So they had to stay under the men's control. And all of their rights were given to the men and husbands. When they were little, they had to obey their father. Once they'd been sent off as a bride, they had to obey their husband. And when they became old, then they had to obey their sons. And so basically it's saying that women were unworthy of living independently. It's not okay for them to live independently. Not only that, at that time, they made the actual rule that men were allowed to have multiple wives. They're allowed polygamy. Brahmins could have 3 wives. Kshatriyas could have 2, and Shudras could have no more than 1. And so basically, as the caste system became stronger and stronger, then women's status also deteriorated. And they were in a very difficult situation. When we look at the Buddhist scriptures, we can see a bit about what the status of women was like during the time of the Buddha at that period. To give one example, there is a story about Kalandaka's son, Sudatta. He went forth and he became a bhikkshu, but he had previously gotten married. He had a bride, but this woman, this wife, had borne no children. She had no male sons. And so Sudatta's mother got really worried. And the reason for this is that if our bride doesn't have any sons, because there are no sons, then all of her household's wealth will be seized by the king. If there's no son, then the government will take it all. It doesn't belong to the women. And so Sudatta tried to think that there has to be something to do. And so she looked for Sudatta, and she made the request to him. In order for you to continue your family line, you have to have a son. If you don't have a son, then we'll all be reduced to poverty. We'll have nothing left. And if you're able to impregnate your bride with a son, that'd be no problem. So she gave a lot of explanation and braved them. Among the 13th year after the Buddha awoke to Buddhahood, then that incident that led to the Buddha to make the rule about unchaste conduct, when the first of the 4 defeats, the situation occurred. So the origin, it's instant, it comes mainly down to the religion and tradition of that place. And the reason it comes down to is that if there is no son in the family, then the king and the government will take all of their wealth and possessions. So because there's this tradition, that was the basic condition that led to the first defeat occurring. First defeat, or rule that would prevent the first major precepts of the Vinaya. So once, because of this, Sudatta had the problem that he had to get his wife pregnant with a son, and this really comes down to women having no happening. So for one second, for example, there are. This also comes down to primary local additions about the other controversies and problems. For this was a story of the Bhikshuni Gupta who went forth, but she had been married before that. And so when her husband had died, then she had no son. Now her husband's father was the Bhikshu Udayan. And so as he was going to that place, he met her. And she'd been reduced to a complete beggar. She was just staying a complete beggar. And so for this reason, Udayan helped her, and she eventually became pregnant. Likewise, in the major Indian and religions and schools, that time, there was no custom of women going forth. There's the Brahmanical religions, there's the Jain religion, and in those great religions, there was probably no custom of women going forth at that time. And likewise, there are also some schools that asserted that women would not be to be offered homage. They're not. It's basically saying that women were not able to practice the Dharma. In any case, there are a lot of these internal, external conditions and reasons. For one thing, there's a lot of societal pressure. And there's a very strong view, sexist view, that men were superior and women inferior. This is too prevalent. So if women went forth, this would have a strong negative effect on the Buddhist Sangha. And the second thing is that because the Sangha prevented, once you've entered the Sangha, then you need to give up practicing lust for sensual pleasures. So if women went forth, then you have to, it's important to determine how the two Sanghas should relate to each other. Likewise, the Sangha lived off of food given as alms, and you have to depend on alms. So women in general are even weaker, generally weaker than men, and they have other specific physical needs. And particularly when you go on this, go on alms, you have to wander and travel to various places, and you have to live going to travel places. And there's be many dangers and difficulties on the road. And so it is necessary to decide how the women could avoid these dangers and difficulties. Likewise, in terms of the people who took the responsibility for the Sangha's education were the elder bhikshus. And even after women went forth, the people who had given them the education had to be the elder bhikshus. So there are a lot of different factors. And so this is probably why it was necessary to make the rules of the 8 heavy dharmas. So next I'd like to tell you a story, and this story is about it's not necessary to say that it was hard for women to go forth and even take and become bhikshunis. It was even difficult for them to receive teachings from the Buddha. It wasn't easy for them. And so there's there's a story that is found in the chapters on monastic discipline. So the Buddha's homeland was the Kapilavastu, right? He went back to Kapilavastu and he was staying at the Banyan Tree Park that had been donated by his father, King Shuddhodana. And so if we think about the 2 times that the two times that the Buddha went to Kapilavastu, he went twice, and this is probably the first time. And then during this time, he was primarily the King Shuddhodana, and the Shakyans would come to him. They'd come in the morning and the evening. They'd come to see him and receive Dharma teachings. They're always coming and going over and over again. Now, one of the Shakyas who was always going there was a Shakya named Mahanaman. He also kept on going over and over to see the Buddha, and he had many opportunities to receive Dharma teachings. And after he heard the Buddha teach the Dharma, he would go home and he'd be really happy. It's like, oh my, the Buddha, oh my, the Dharma, the Sangha, oh wow. Now that the Buddha's got my life has really become fruitful, it now has a point. He's just said this, right? And when he said this, then Mahanama's wife, and she said, so what happened? Why are you so happy? What happened that makes you so happy? And then when he said this, Mahanama said, so the Bhagavan has come here, and he's teaching the Dharma to hundreds of people. And just hearing the Dharma has helped many hundreds of living beings develop superior realization of the true nature. As extremely fortunate, he said. And what his wife said to him, what Mahanama's wife said is, the Buddha coming is only fruiting for you men, for you husbands. But for us women, it doesn't give us anything. There's no point or benefit for us. The Buddha came to the world for the men's sake, not for us women's. You get the opportunity to receive Dharma teachings, but we don't. And Mahanama said, you shouldn't say that. The Bhagavan really has a wish to help all sentient beings. He has love for all sentient beings and compassion for all beings. So normally, in the Indian tradition, when you go to take Dharma teachings, there probably wasn't any custom at that time in India of women going to receive Dharma teachings, but it's okay for you to go to him. He's really compassionate. So you can go. And you'll also be able to hear the Dharma from the Buddha. Just as we listen to the Dharma, you can too. And King Mahanama said, she said, I'd really like to go, but King Shuddhadana keeps on going over and over to see the Buddha. And if I'm going there before them, I'd get really embarrassed. I don't dare go. I'd be too embarrassed. And Shakya Mahanama thought about it. He thought, maybe I should go talk with King Shuddhadana about this. But then we thought about it again. No, if I go speak to King Shuddhadana about his wife, if you think I'm making problems, it's going to be difficult. I can't do that. He's thinking about it again. He thought, well, King Shuddhadana's wife was Mahaprajapati, right? And Shuddhadana really respected Prajapati high. He considered very highly, so he thought that if he spoke to Prajapati and got her to speak to Shuddhadana, then the king would immediately listen to her. And so Mahanama went to speak to Mahaprajapati, and he explained the whole situation to her. And when he said it to her, then Prajapati said, I can ask King Shuddhadana. And Mahanama went home, and he told his wife and many other Shakyan women, and we get all the Shakya women, if you got to go and ask the Dharma, he said. When he said that, then they all thought, this is a great idea. So they all got together. The Shakyan women all got together, and they went to see Mahaprajapati. He said, we've heard how the Buddha is teaching so many people the Dharma these days. We also want to hear the Dharma. Maybe the king should go in the mornings and we can go in the afternoon. Would it be okay to plan it like that? So when the king was going there, then they couldn't. There'd be a lot of Shakyan men going. They couldn't go together because they'd be embarrassed to go together with him. So the king goes in the morning and we go in the afternoon. Would that be okay? They asked. And Prajapati said, sister, you've got a really good idea. I could go ask the king. So just wait a moment. And she immediately went to see the king. And when she went to see the king, then normally King Shuddhadana really respected Prajapati. And so whenever Prajapati came, and he'd immediately get up, stand up, and listen to her. And until Prajapati had asked her a question, he'd given an answer, he wouldn't sit down, whether on a chair or on a carpet or whatever, he wouldn't sit down. And so Prajapati, what she said to him is, I've heard that the Buddha is teaching the Dharma to a lot of people. So I heard this, and the Shakyan women would also like to go. The Shakyan women would also like to go hear the Dharma. So I think maybe you should go in the morning. Then I'll take the Shakya women in the afternoon. This is because the Shakya women have to go in the morning. They have a lot of housework that they have to do, and they can't see them. But it's easy for them to go in the afternoon. And when she said this, then Shuddhadana, he immediately nodded his head. So King Shuddhadana immediately nodded his head and he said, oh, we can do as you suggest. And so in any case, then Prajapati Gautami led the 500 Shakya women, all of these many Shakya women, they went down to the Banyan Tree Park to see the Buddha. So if we look at this situation, we cannot forget about anything else. I'm having a bit of a problem with the internet. So when Mahaprajapati made the request and King Shuddhadana said, I'll do that, they got the permission. And then Prajapati took all the Shakya women down to the Banyan Tree Park to see the Buddha. So when we look at this situation, it says not only was it difficult for women to go forth, it's even not so easy for women to go listen to the Dharma teachings from the Buddha. It's like they're very apprehensive about going. They didn't dare to go listen to the teachings. So in brief, the Buddha allowed everyone, without distinction of high or low caste, to practice the Dharma. And he gave an opportunity for women to go forth and become bhikshunis. Now, at that time, in Indian society and Indian religions, this was like a new tradition and new example for Indian society at that time. Even when we get to the 21st century, still India, it's very clear that we haven't been able to dispel the problems of caste and sexism in India. Because a lot of people hold these whole traditional terms. People say that this has permeated the blood of Indian people. And so it's in their DNA. And so there's no way to completely eliminate it. There are people who do speak like this. So if we look at the situation, it becomes here clear that the compassion was compassionate or very loving and kind and very broad-minded. I think that becomes clearer and clearer. Likewise, you also call the Buddha the charioteer who tames beings. This is like this epithet we call him by, right? So the reason we call him the charioteer of the Buddhism is because he's able to change the direction of these bad customs, to fix the bad customs. And that's praising him in terms of that. But I'd like to speak about I'd like to speak about the reason why the Buddha did not easily allow women to go forth.
In
any case, the Buddha Shakyamuni did eventually allow women to go forth and give them bhakshuni vows, but at first he made it difficult and he didn't give them easily. So what's the reason why it was so difficult at first? Now, there are several different explanations of this. In the 11th century, the Tibetan translator Bhikshu Lodha translated an explanation of the finer points of the Vinaya. And this is what it says there. So what it says, to summarize it, haven't all the Tathagatas of the past had a fourfold community? So why is it that women made it so difficult for women to go forth? What's the reason for this? And so what it says, at that time, the Indian scholars of that time, what the scholars of that time said, it was in order to produce world weariness in Mahaprajapati and the 500 Shakyan women, as well as in other women. This is because if the Buddha said, if you practice the Dharma, you can achieve the 4 results. He said that based in terms of the Dharma, the women is not a lower place, that the women are able to practice the Dharma. He recognized that this was so. So while he recognized this, he still didn't give the permission easily. It made it difficult. And the reason was so that they developed world weariness. So they think that, we've done such different hardships. And then in the end, finally achieved the opportunity to go forth. And so this is the result of many things. And so we must not let it go to waste. And so we need to really work hard at our practice. So in order to give them the idea that it's difficult to obtain and to show that it is really priceless opportunity. So the Buddha did not give them ordination easily in order that they could recognize this. So this is the reason why even though they asked many times, the Buddha did not give them. So there's a purpose and there are reasons for it. So the basic reason is so that they would think it's difficult to achieve. So that once they achieve them, they'd really take particular interest in practice. And so for that reason, there's a reason why the Buddha refused for 3 times. And so this is something that the Indian masters of the past said, and this is according to the Vinaya master Shilapalita. Likewise, there's also a well-known Theravada elder named Nyanaponika Thera. And what he says is that for women to be allowed to go forth and take Bhikshuni vows, Lakshmana had to be really clever and cunning, and he had to be so insistent. At first, the Buddha didn't want to do it. He had to change the Buddha's mind. So people will say this, but if we think about it well, but if we have confidence that the Buddha is an individual who had already awakened to perfect Buddhahood, then it wouldn't be possible for anyone else to have the power to make him change his mind. And the reason for this is that the Buddha is always resting equipoise within the Dharma nature, or the true nature. He's never wavering from that. And since he's always resting, looking at the actual nature of phenomena, no matter how many explanations other people go, there's no way it could change the Buddha's thought. And so this is what Nyanaponika Thera says.
Oh, yeah.
Likewise, another perspective we can look at it from is if we look in the finer points of Vinaya discipline in the Tibetan translation. And so this is later during the first council. Before the first council, we'll speak about this in a few days. Mahakashapa spoke about many of Ananda's faults. And one of the faults that Mahakashapa said is that Ananda had supported the ordination of women, and this was not right. So this is one fault that Mahakashapa ascribed to Ananda. And Ananda gave the reason as being this. For one thing, he gave 2 reasons. The first is related to the Buddha's personal situation. This is that Mahaprajapati was King Shuddhodana's queen. And she is the one who raised the Buddha and nursed him from a very young age, because his mother passed away at a little time. So the person who raised him from the time he was little was Mahaprajapati. As the actual mother who raised him was Mahaprajapati. So Mahaprajapati, in order that Mahaprajapati had been extremely kind to the Buddha in the past, and in order to fulfill her wish, it's a time when he could fulfill her wish. So it's really important for that Ananda saw that this is important for her to have the opportunity to practice the Dharma, to repay her kindness. Another reason, the second reason, is that in the past, the completely Buddhas of the past, they all had a 4-fold community. They had bhikshunis. So for this, I thought it would be okay for the Bhagavan Buddha to also have a 4-fold community. And so he gave an explanation with worldly and Dharma reasons. In any case, at that time, when the Buddha listened to Ananda's explanations, he thought that there is a purpose to them, there are reasons for it. And then he allowed it. It's not like the Buddha had no choice. In particular, another thing we need to think about is that the main point about the Dharma is that if women can go forth, they can achieve the results. They can achieve the 4 results of the spiritual way. So you can achieve all of the 4 results of the spiritual way, the ultimate results, as a woman. This is the most important point. So because the Buddha is not denigrating women, but in the society, women are looked down on, so that's a different matter. But in terms of the Dharma, do not deserve to be denigrated. So that's the most important point. So if they need to, if they can achieve the achieve the four results, why aren't they allowed to go forth? If you say it's okay for them to achieve the results as a lay practitioner, but that's difficult. It'd be difficult, and the reason is because lay people have many activities for a purpose. They have to continually work. They have many things that they need to do and spend their entire day practicing the Dharma. They don't have the time to do it. They have no time for Dharma practice. If you want to focus your mind and practice the Dharma and have fewer adversities and more favorable conditions, then you have to enter the Sangha. So that's the main reason you have to go forth. If you cannot achieve the four results, then there's no point to go forth, because there is no point to going forth. So this is another point we need to consider. In particular, as I mentioned, the Mahaprajapati Sutra that is in Chinese, and if you read that, I saw in that Mahaprajapati first asked the Buddha. The way she explained it was described there is different. What she said is that what I've heard is that the Buddha has said that if women go forth, they can achieve the four spiritual results. That's what I heard, she said. So that's a little different than we have in the Tibetan tradition. So if they're able to achieve the result, then please give them the vows of going forth. So the most important point is whether they can achieve results or not. And the Buddha accepted from the very beginning that they can achieve results, and that's an important point. So in brief, the reason why the Buddha didn't, or when the Buddha didn't immediately give the vows to the Buddha, is because to show that by making them delay is showing that it's more difficult for women to go forth. And this is because of many internal and external situations in society. And since there is a danger if they did not do it properly, so he did it and he delayed it in order to emphasize that there's some danger. So then we have this doubt that happens. And so if that is the case, then what does it mean that the Buddha said the teachings would have endured over 1,000 years, but because of women going forth, would remain 500 years less? Now, in terms of the question, there's an even bigger question than that. Because the Buddha did say that his teachings would not remain more than 500 years if they would go forth. But it's just an actual fact that the true Dharma has remained for over 1,000 years. So what does this mean? Likewise, there are many treatises, including the Great Exposition or the Mahavibhasha. These include discussion and refutation of objections to the idea that the women made rules of the 8 heavy dharmas. That the fault of diminishing teachings by 500 years did not occur. So here's a quotation from the Great Exposition of Abhidharma. So I don't need to read it word for word. So there are 2 pages of it. So here it is. So I don't need to read it, but the main point here is at that time, the 500 years, earlier 500 years had already passed, and it was in the second 500-year period of the Buddha's teachings. So the teachings had still not disappeared, and it was very clear the teachings were still present. So people began to wonder why the Buddha had said this in the past, and people started to suspect this. And there were 2 different explanations that are said in this quote. And the first is that when he said that the duration of the teachings would be decreased by 500 years, this means that people would not achieve the true liberation of the Dharma. Now, another explanation is that if the nuns had not accepted the 8 heavy dharmas, then the dharma teaching would have decreased by 500 years. But because Mahaprajapati and her followers had accepted the 500 years, the teachings were not decreased by 500 years, and they would remain for the full 1,000 years. So this is another explanation. So this is an important explanation. Otherwise, if you have these two 500 periods, an earlier and a long run, then there'd only be the early 500-year period, and the second one wouldn't happen. But this had already happened. This was already after Nagarjuna. Even during the time, then you'd have to accept that the Buddhism had disappeared at the time of Nagarjuna and the great scholars of Nalanda University. But we can't accept that at all. So I'd like to now continue speaking about Ananda. And the first of these was about how he supported women going forth. So I've explained that. So the next one is how he helped relieve women of their difficulties. So this is the point we're at now. So Ananda gave a lot of support to women in going forth and establishing the Bhikshuni Sangha. But it's not just that. He also gave assistance and help to women in many different ways. But because he gave assistance and help to women, this also caused him many difficulties. The other day, I told the story about Stulananda revolted against Mahakashapa. I gave a couple of these. So I'd like to tell two more stories about this. There was one that I mentioned the other day that I didn't tell right, so I need to tell it properly now. And then there's another one I'd like to add. So one day, Mahakashapa had gone for his entrance. He put on his robes and his dharma robes. He was carrying his alms bowl. And he went to Shravasti to beg for alms. And he was going there, and the Bhikshuni Stulananda, right? So this Bhikshuni, she was also going out for alms, and it was at the same time. And so she saw Mahakashapa from a long way. She saw him coming, and he saw that along the path where he was walking, there was like a cesspool. It's like a place where everyone defecated and urinated. You saw that he was coming by them. And when she saw that, Ananda thought, oh, I've got to do something to get this. I'll do something to upset and upset this idiot and this fool. She ran quickly. And when she got near Mahakashapa, no, the place, Mahakashapa was walking right by the cesspool with all the feces in Europe, and there was like some sort of a rock or maybe some sort of like a ball or something. She threw it, and it splashed all of the feces and urine in there, and it covered Mahakashapa's dharma robes and his alms bowl. Now, when that happens, an ordinary person would normally get really angry, but Mahakashapa didn't get angry. And he said really very calmly, he said to Stulananda, this isn't your fault. The one who's done all of this is Ananda. And it's because women, Nanda made it so that ill-behaved women could go forth in the Dharma Vinaya and be fully ordained. And that's why I'm having the problem today. I wouldn't have the problem otherwise. So that's what Mahakashapa said. And because Stulananda made that rule, the Buddha made a new rule. And the rule that he made was that bhikshunis could not make the bhikshus dirty or unclean and filthy. They couldn't befoul their dharma robes and so forth. So this is a new rule that the Buddha made. And there's an even more surprising incident. This is another time. Mahakasha put on his skirt and dharma robe, and he took his alms and he went to Shravasti farms, and Stulananda saw him. And she immediately ran up to Mahakasha. But when she got to Mahakasha, and they got face to face to him, and she said, "You're a complete idiot. You're an dolt. You're an idiot. And she spat right on his face. She just spat. And you're an idiot. You're dolt. And she spit at him. And when he'd been spat on in his face, then Mahakashpa, he didn't get angry, but he gave the same response as before. It's not your fault. The one that did all this is Ananda. He allowed women to go forth and did all this stuff. And so this is why this is all happening. The bhikshus heard about the incident. And after they heard it, then they went to tell the Buddha about it. And Buddha said, Stulananda, she's really bad. The way she's behaving, that's not a mendicant's behavior. That's not a bhikshuni's behavior. Even prostitutes don't treat Mahakashapa like that. So in the future, it's not right for bhikshunis to spit on bhikshus. And he made a new result. He said, if they do that, it's an offense. So in brief, we really can't know the reason why Stulananda and others disliked Mahakashapa so much, why she happened. But when it happened, then the problem, Mahakashapa said that it all came down to Ananda, because Ananda had allowed women to go forth. And so there were people who had considered that all of these offenses happened because of Ananda allowing women to go forth. Somebody looked at that there are members of the Sangha who definitely were members of the Sangha who thought that it was not right for women to have been allowed to go forth and become bhikshunis. And so this is one way that Ananda had difficulties because of helping women go forth. Now, the second was the situation of Ananda, the outcast girl, Surupa. And so this is, there's a story is found in the Tibetan canon. So Ananda was actually a very famous, and he had such a gentle character, so many people really liked him. And likewise, many women really got very attracted to Ananda. For example, there was an outcast girl named Surupa. So she was a very low class woman. One day when she was going off to fetch water, she met Ananda, who was going for that. So Ananda was thirsty, so he asked for water, right? Now, in India at that time, there's not the custom at all for high caste people to ask for water from low caste women. But Ananda didn't care about caste, so he asked for water. And when she saw Ananda's face and his body and she just fell in love with him. And she began to think, oh, if only he were my husband. But Ananda was a monk, right? He had gone forth, so he wouldn't accept that. But Surupa's mother knew how to cast spells. So she wanted to use a spell to enchant Ananda to make her come in and go to the husband. She went back home and she told this to her mother. And there's Ananda, she said to her mom, and I absolutely have to get married to him. Now what Ananda said is, if Ananda weren't free of desire, I could enchant him, but we got to be careful. But we have to be careful because King Prasejit has a lot of faith in the Buddha. And if he learns of this, then he'll get to wipe out all of us outcasts. And actually, the Buddha is really powerful. He can overwhelm all lust and desire. And then I said, you can whatever say, if you're unable to do this, I'll kill myself, she said. When she said, I'll kill myself, then her mother had no choice. She loves her daughter. She had no idea. So she immediately, in the middle of the house, she made a mandala and started to cast a spell. And so this spell struck Ananda, and he was in the mountain, but he was unable to control his mind. He immediately had to come. He had no choice. He was no longer in control, and he had to go to the outcast girl's house. And when And Surupa saw him coming from a long way, and she was really delighted. When Ananda arrived at the outcast's house, when he got there, he had no control. He had no choice. He didn't want to go, but because of the power was just pulling him there. But in his mind, he really didn't want it. And so he was crying, somebody saying, I'm having this difficulty. So why is it the Buddha doesn't know that I'm having this? And so this is what he thought. And at that point, the Buddha knew at that point, and he cast his own spell that countered or counteracted the outcast spell and made it released him from his power. And then when that happened, then Ananda immediately fled right back to the monastery. And when he fled back there, the Surupa's mother casting the spell didn't help him. But still, Surupa's, her desires didn't work. And so then she was not satisfied. So wherever Ananda went, Surupa would follow him. And wherever he'd go, she'd go. So wherever Ananda went, she'd go with him. And in the daytime, if he'd go back to the monastery, and when he returned there, then she'd wait for him right outside the monastery gate. She'd wait right there by the gate of the monastery. If you look at it from one side, it's really sad, right? She just had his day. When Ananda went over to ask for alms, she'd wait outside whatever house he'd gone to, looking at from afar. So wherever she went, she was always following Ananda, like there's nothing he could do. For one thing, like there's nothing he could do, and the other aspect is he was embarrassed about it, and if other people see this, it's going to be really bad. And so it's really difficult for him. It's like so he had nothing else to do, so he went to the Buddha and said, "This outcast girl Surupa is following me wherever I go. So Buddha, please protect me. See me with compassion." And the Buddha said, "Have no fear. You don't need to be afraid. It's not important." And then Bhagavana called that outcast girl, Surupa. And what he said to her, he said, I heard that you really like Ananda. So do you want to get married to Ananda, to have a family with him? And the outcast girl said, Surupa, he says, I do. I would like that. And the Buddha said, well, in that case, will your parents allow that? Will they give permission? And she said, oh, yeah, they'll give permission. I'll go ask them. And so she said, oh, I'll ask them. She went to her parents and immediately asked them for permission. When she did, then the two parents then took Surupa to the Buddha, and they said, oh, we're giving our daughter to Ananda. We've made up our minds. And they offered her to the Buddha. Now, after they'd been offered it, then that's okay. So you parents, you first go home. And he sent the parents home. And then he said to the outcast girl, Surupa, so you really love Ananda. So if you really love Ananda, so you have to do what Ananda does. So like Ananda has no hair, right? He's shaved his head, right? And he wears the Dharma robe, right? So you need to shave your head and wear the Dharma robe too. So this just said, oh yes, I'll do it. And she allowed her hair to be, and she went forth. Then after that, now this isn't described in the Tibetan version of the story, but there is a story of Surupa in Chinese, and what it says there is that after that, the Buddha asked her, so what do you want? So she said, you really like Ananda. The Buddha said to her, what do you like? And so I said, what do you like about him? I like the way he looked. There's nothing about his eyes, his nose, his everything. She said she liked everything about Ananda. And the Buddha said, so you have the ears, you have the... So all of the Buddhas have to think about his ears and his flesh and everything. It's all made out of filthy stuff. So why do you like it? There's no reason for you to like that. And he said in this book, when he taught her a lot of Dharma, he told many reasons. And then she sort of realized the nature, and she became an arhat. And after she had achieved the level of an arhat, the Buddha knew this. The Buddha knew that she'd had a realization. When she had the realization, the Buddha said, "Now it's okay for you to go to Ananda," he said. When the Buddha said that she'd achieved the results, and we said, "Go, you can go see Ananda," she said, "Oh, what I did before didn't work." She was too embarrassed. "I made big mistakes," she said. And so she confessed with great remorse. So this is what it says in the Chinese. In any case, this Buddha Surupa went forth, and not only that, she achieved the level of arhatship. We're going to talk about the outcasts. At that time, it was a really low caste. Even these days, if the low caste people would, the high caste women are not even allowed to touch the food or the things that low caste people have touched. There's that tradition now. So at that time, all the Brahmins and Shramis from the area of Shravasta have heard about an outcast girl who had gone forth. They were just amazed. How can it be right for an outcast woman to practice Dharma along with the bhikshus and bhikkshunis? All the bhikshus are going to be tainted and sullied by this. And how could we Brahmins and Kshatriyas and householders pay respect to her? Because you've got an outcast girl there. They're all, and she's gone forth. They have to make offerings to her. How can we make offerings to her? And so they really criticized it. And the Buddha just really knew. They really criticized him. And King Prasenajit heard about this. And King Prasenajit, this isn't good. How did this happen? How is it that there's this outcast girl who's doing this unclean girl practicing? She's now in the Sangha. That's not at all good, he thought. So he was really unhappy about it. So he got on his horse and he went with the men, along with many of the Brahmins and householders of Shravasti, to the Buddha to complain about it. He said, "That's not going to work at all," he complained. And he wanted to complain. Then after King Prasenajit and all of they had all assembled, then the Buddha knew why they had come. And so he asked them to call for the Bhikshuni Surupa and had her sit down there. And then he explained at length to King Prasenajit and the public how the outcast Surupa had been, he explained her previous lives. So in this lifetime, she was a low caste, she was an outcast, but she was in a very high class before it. And in that time, then Ananda had been in an extremely low caste. Now, the reason why Surupa fell in love with Ananda now is that in previous lives, she had been in love with Ananda. And so for that reason, this situation happened. And so he explained the whole situation in detail. And he also cleared how the high and low caste were just made up by Brahmins. There was actually no real difference in caste. And when he explained this all, then everyone thought, oh, that's where there are reasons for it. That matches the nature. And so everyone's happy about it and the problem's resolved. Otherwise, there would have been a big problem. If King Prasenajit and all of the Brahmins and everyone from and householders from Shravasta went to the Buddha to complain about it, right? So that's another situation. It wasn't just this outcast girl, a lay woman, a householder who fell in love with another. There are also some nuns who fell in love with him. Now, there's a story in the four agamas that are preserved in Chinese, and in those there is a story about a bhikshuni from Kaushambi. And she had someone go to tell Ananda, say, that she was sick, so Ananda, please come. So the main point is that this bhikshuni was actually in love with Ananda. And because she was in love with him, she pretended to be sick and to summon Ananda so that she could actually seduce Ananda. And so Ananda comes, and she's like not wearing, she's probably staying there without any clothes on. And so Ananda said, don't do that. And it's not good for you to be like that. She madly put on her clothes. So Ananda had not yet had not become an arhat. He had not given up all of his desire for passion. But even that, he had very strong carefulness and awareness and mindfulness. And then he very clearly used it as an opportunity to he explained her this, and then the woman felt remorse and she confessed. In any case, that's another situation or difficulty that Ananda had. Now, the last one is how he restored peace in the royal palace. Now, what this is about is there's an incident that happened one time. There's the king Ajatashatru of Magadha. He had many different kings. So he had many kings, had at least one or two, and they all wanted to achieve Dharma teachings. But because they were queens, they weren't allowed to go anywhere outside. They weren't allowed to go out like ordinary people. They couldn't go outside. It's like when you put a bird in a bird cage. They didn't have any good opportunities to go to leave the palace and go to the monastery to listen to the Buddha teach. So all the queens got together and they asked them to have a bhikshu sent as a representative of the Buddha, teaching them Dharma so that they could receive Dharma teachings from him. So they asked the king Ajatashatru about this. And so the king agreed, and not only did he agree, he said, which bhikshu would you like to have sent? And so they all talked about it. And they said, they all went to ask for Ananda, who was like the treasure of the Dharma. For one, the person here is a treasure of the Dharma. Another asked, which is kind of handsome. And so the women liked him. And so the women said, we have to invite Ananda. And so Ajatashatru asked the Buddha, and then from then on, at certain times, at fixed times, Ananda would go to the palace and teach the queens the Dharma. But one day, the king always wore like a crown, like a jeweled crown. So he held the royal crown. And there was a really beautiful priceless jewel that someone stole. Someone saw it, never saw it, and then passed it like big uproar in the counters. They're looking all of this, they're searching, they're digging up all the ground to look to see where this could have gone. And so the whole palace was in an uproar. And because of this, the queens were also unable, they were also really excited. And when it came to be time for Ananda to teach the Dharma, and before the past, they'd really focused and listened with great attention, but this time they're unable to pay attention as they had before. And when Ananda realized that they're unable to pay attention, he said, normally you're able to pay attention, but today you can't. When he asked them, what they said, there's been this thing has happened in the royal palace. And so Ananda was really compassionate, so he immediately went to the king. So you should gather everyone you suspect of maybe stealing the jewels. And I've got a way from to very easily return the jewel or quietly return the jewels. And so then the king did exactly as Ananda said. So what they did is Ananda had in one place, he had a tent set up. And in the tent, there was a big jug or a big vase, and he filled it with water. And so the people they suspected, there are several people they suspected of stealing the jewel. He comes down, they had to each go in one at a time. So first one was sent in, then the second one was allowed to go in, and no one else was in there. So it's only the people they suspected. There's the jug, or the vase there filled with water. There wasn't anything else in there. And they would go and come back. No, actually, there's the actual thief of the jewel. And he took that opportunity to put the jewel in the water, in the vase. And so if they find out I steal they'll execute me. So if they got an opportunity, so he had an opportunity to give it back. So he took that opportunity to put the jewel in the vase. And when he put it in the vase, then because of Ananda's evidence, then they got the jewel back, and the thief wasn't punished because they didn't know who it was, because each person one at a time then would come out. So no one knew which one was the thief. No one other than the thief would know. So the thief was not punished, he was not executed, and the palace was kind of returned to peace as it had been before. So because of this incident, Ananda became even more well-known than he had been before. And everyone said that the Sangha Buddhist was really wonderful, and it became more renowned than it had been before. It became very well-known. So I better stop speaking about Ananda's, all the stories about Ananda. Otherwise, I'll never finish because there's so many stories about Ananda. And if I were to teach each of them in turn, there wouldn't be time for it all. So tomorrow's the day off. So from the day after tomorrow, we'll speak about the First Council. So I think that's probably enough for today.